Hello everybody, welcome back to my Biocinematics production live stream. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're having a good day. And just before we get started, a little bit of the plan today. So I'm not working on a specific shot for a video today. I'm going to be making a wallpaper. And the idea is I'm going to do a render of some molecules and you get to give me a little bit of feedback and input in terms of some of the look. I'll get your advice. And at the end of the stream, I'll have, hopefully the image will be done, and I'll have a link to download it, and you can download it and put it on your desktop background or phone or whatever you want to do with it, or don't, it's up to you. We're just gonna have some fun. So I have a bit of an idea of exactly what I want to do, but we'll see how it goes. I just have a rough plan and we'll see what actually happens. All right, so I think I've got everything good to go. So here we go. So I'm not starting from absolute zero. I have a plan for sort of the molecule that I want to use. And in previous streams, I was talking a little bit about molecular rigs. So I thought I would show a little bit before I start the actual illustration, a little bit of setup and stuff like that. How's everybody doing? I think I've got, yeah. So this is phosphatidylcholine, and that's a great name. It's a lipid. It's a phospholipid. If you're familiar with molecular biology, then you'll pretty much know what that's about. If you're not, well, this is kind of one of the important molecules that holds your cells together. It creates the membrane around your cells. This is one of the most common of those molecules. There's a variety of them. There's diversity and across organisms and across, different types of cells. But this one is pretty common. And if you've ever looked at the ingredients list on various food products and you see something like soy lecithin or egg-based lecithin, I think I'm saying that right, that's basically what this is. This is part of the family of molecules that's called lecithin. So it's important and it's nutritious, I guess. And I've got it set up to wiggle around. And the reason for that will become clear as I get more into this illustration. But for the time being, we're just going to make it dance. Phosphatidylcholine has, all phospholipids tend to have two legs. 1, 2, sort of call them legs. And a head, which is at the top here. And if we look more closely at it, you can see that we've got a phosphorus atom here. That's the orange one. And that's why they're called phospholipids, phosphorus. And this blue nitrogen atom is part of a group that's called choline, this carbon-carbon nitrogen with methyl groups. And that's why this is called phosphatidylcholine. And if we wanted to be even more precise about the exact name of this molecule, it is, wait for it, here we go, 1,2-dioleoyl SN-glycerol-3-phosphocholine. Yep. There will not be a quiz. You don't have to, yeah. But basically what that's saying is there's 2 oleic acid molecules, and that indicates how long these chains are. And there's also going to be a double bond there, which may or may not be interesting in the illustration. We'll see. So I've got this molecule rigged up in Houdini. That's the software that I'm using, if you haven't seen it before. And basically that allows me to pose this molecule how I want, because molecules like these are not static. They're not like a rigid steel sculpture. They're flexible, especially something like this, which has long sort of chain tail structures. And that's why I'm giving it some flexibility here. And the way that I'm doing that is I've got this rig set up here with a whole bunch of joints or bones and a whole bunch of controls, and that allow each of these groups of atoms to rotate around a bond, and that's how molecules move, change conformation. They can only, generally speaking, they only really rotate in this axis. But if you have a whole bunch of them all rotating a bit in that axis, you can see you get lots of flexibility. And I've set this up so that I just want to change any of these parameters. I've set up this rig, which was kind of an interesting challenge, but I think it ended up being a pretty useful rig, because what I can do is I can have random motion. I can turn off random motion for the tails and turn off the random motion for the head. And then it's just static. That's just how the file was downloaded, the molecular data file from the protein data bank. That's how it came. But then what I can do is I can pose it in a specific way. If I want to be like, hey, let's do it like that, or like this. In textbooks, you'll see these as very, like, well, it depends how they're done, but you'll usually see it as kind of two sort of straight tails pointing down with the head at the top. And because membranes have a bilayer, there's two, well, we'll see how that works. Not to get ahead of myself. But there's actually a tremendous amount of flexibility in these chains. And whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. What am I grabbing? I don't know what I did there. The benefit of these being so flexible is that you have like a fluid characteristics, like oil, right? Oil is liquid at room temperature. Fats are tend to be solid at room temperature, but you can melt them into a liquid without adding too much heat. And that has to do with the properties of these chains. Yeah, but I don't need to get too much into that. What do I really want to do here? Basically, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be creating an illustration of a lipid bilayer. But because this is Whimsical Wallpaper Wednesday, I'm going to be doing something a little bit not strictly... well, it's going to be scientific, but it's not going to be like a rigorous educational tool. It's just going to be something that looks neat and is kind of fun. So because this is Whimsical Wallpaper Wednesday, I'm going to be making socially distancing lipids, which just means that they're not going to be all bunched up together. They're going to be spread out. Yeah, that's the plan. All right. So because I've got this random motion here, I can change the sort of the amplitude of it and really make it go nuts. And I also have a jitter, so that it's like you can kind of various parameters here. So we could really reduce the main amplitude and just have a little bit of jitter, and then reduce the, so it's just like, so if I was doing an animation, this is sort of what I would do, but I don't want to animate it. But what I do want to do is I want to have in the membrane, I want to have different conformations of the lipid. We're going to just start with one, but then later on we'll add in a bunch more. So let's just start with one here. So I'm just going to make sure that this is all default. And maybe I'll pose let's see. Yeah, so that's the original. So let's just give some range of motion and find a conformation that we think is interesting. I mean, that's not bad there. I don't want to get them too close together because I don't have any, as you can see here. So what's happening here is the ball and stick representation is actually being generated after the motion is created. So we end up with stuff that's like binding where it shouldn't be binding and overlapping and stuff like that. In the future, I'm hoping at some point I can kind of figure out a way to have this sort of random motion, but don't have the atoms colliding with each other and creating stuff that's not natural. But yeah, let's do something like that. Maybe I can pose it just a little bit. Do something like, just make sure that's not the double, oh shoot, that is the double bond. So there's supposed to be a double bond here, which means that this bond should not be rotating. It should be kind of locked in plane. Just kind of something like that. Yeah. Where's the other double? So there's another double bond that's supposed to be here. I'll actually create the double bonds a little bit later. And we could just make it something like that. All right, so let's see. Let's just start roughing this out. Just want to, yeah. Because I did actually on Twitter, I said that I was going to show how the double bond works in the double bond tool that I was working on a little while ago, how that actually works, because that's kind of cool. All right, so let's say this is going to be our membrane. Just going to hide that. So we've got a clean scene, and I'm going to bring in I'm just trying to think if I want to generate where I want to generate stuff. I'll just do it inside here. All right, so I'm going to grab, instead of the full molecule, I don't know if you can see it very well on the stream, but I'm just grabbing the points, the input points that define where each atom is. And then what I can do is I can put down my PDB tool, my protein tool, use the scene data, and there we go. There's our space filling representation. We can change the coloring if we want, for our phospholipid. Neat. Okay. But I did, yeah, so let's take a look at the ball and stick. So let's put sticks in, color them, yeah, stick radius. Okay. So basically what we're wanting to do is there's two places in this molecule that don't just have a single bond represented by these individual sticks, but we actually have a double bond. So let's figure out where we want to put those. So we've got turn on point numbers here. So there's specific places, and you know when you hear about like monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats, saturated fats, trans fats, all that sort of stuff. This is exactly what people are talking about. So this is, you can see here that, I see. Yeah, you can see here on each of these carbon atoms, there's two hydrogens, which are the white atoms. So black is carbon, white is hydrogen. You can see that there's two on each of these, and that means that these are saturated. These positions are saturated. But if we look over here, oh hey, these two only have one hydrogen. And so these carbons are unsaturated. And because there's one position on this chain that only has one hydrogen across this bond, or there's two of them, but together they form a single bond. It's a little bit counterintuitive. We call it monounsaturated. Although there's another one on this one. I don't know if that counts as polyuns. I think that's still monounsaturated. Yeah, so when you hear about, and when you hear about trans fats, so what happens is you've got a saturated chain, and then they add a double bond through a chemical process, and because in a certain because of the way the chemical process is done, instead of having this sort of U-shape angle, the chain kind of comes off at the opposite angle. So it's like this white atom and all of this stuff switch places. And so you've got this one coming out this side and this one coming out that side. And that's called a trans configuration. So cis and trans. And so that's why you get trans fats. And apparently they're not as healthy for reasons that I actually don't know. I don't understand that bit. There's always interesting stuff that one doesn't yet know. All right, so let's just show how we can make this double bond. So I've got this double bond node, and we want it to go, it's a little hard to see here, but that's 16 and 17. So let's go start point 16 and 17. And let's make this a little chunkier. And turn off the point numbers. There we go. So now we've got these two links linking these. And what I did with this version of my double bond tool is that it automatically figures out how to twist it so that it's most accurately representative of how the bond is arranged. So this is without it. I'll turn off the highlighting there. So without it and with it. There. And because this is being generated after the animation, I think we can see, if we turn on the double bond, it's going to be a little bit slower to animate, but the idea being as this chain changes conformation, the double bond stays where it should be because it's automatically figuring out what orientation to have. I don't know. I thought that was kind of cool. So let's do the same for the other side. Let's figure out what number we need for the other side. Can you spot the carbon atoms that only have one hydrogen? Answer here, 34 and 35. There we go. And you can see that it's automatically oriented at a 90 degrees plane to the other bonds that are coming out. And if you watch the carbon-based lifeform video, that's on my main channel, then you would know why that's the case, because carbon has 4 bonds with 4 other atoms, or it creates 4 bonds, and those bonds are in a tetrahedral arrangement. There you go. All right, and now because I've created 2 of these double bond tools, it's doing like calculations inside it, and so it's actually a little bit slower to calculate. You can see that now I'm down to like 7 frames per second if I wanted to actually play through this, but that'll work. So that's the double bond tool, but like I said, I don't think we're actually going to be using it because I think we don't want ball and stick. I think we just are going to be ending up with an atomic representation in our illustration, in our wallpaper. So that was just a fun aside. Boy, I'd better get moving if I actually want to finish this by the time the stream is done. Okay, let's go. So I'm going to do cache this out to a file. I'm just going to do a bit of stuff for a bit, but feel free to ask questions or whatever as I just do some geometry caching and stuff. The reason why will become clear later. So we're going to call this we'll say it to a job data geo operator string name. Nah. Okay. So we're going to save that out. And then we're going to bring it back in. Yeah, let's just do the simple version for now. All right. Just copy this. All right. So all we've done is we've just written it to disk and then brought it back in. And because the frame oops. We wrote out frame 115. I'm just gonna lock it to frame 115. All right. So, and then let's do our PDB atoms. Let's make some atoms so you can actually see what's going on. Use the scene data. All right. And I'm actually going to pack this into like a sort of self-contained. We're not going to get to see the colors very nicely for now, but that's okay because we'll get colors happening later on. All right, so what we want to do is we want to put these on a membrane, socially distanced apart. Is that a phrase? Social distancingly appropriately placed. So we're going to get a grid, and we're going to make this a big grid. And we're going to put this back a bit. Yeah, so that we've got the edge of it happening here. All right. I don't know how big I want this to be, but the nice thing is we can always change that later. All right, now let's scatter some lipids on this membrane. That's a lot. That's too many. Well, let's just see. Let's just see what happens. It's more interesting to see the sort of the result kind of as we go. Cool. Let's see where our grid is. All right, so a couple problems here. These are too crowded. They're all going to, lipids can't catch diseases, but you know what I mean. It's a reference to our current social situation. So we could reduce the count. You can play with that later, but I'm also, actually, you know what, I'm gonna, let's increase, because I want to do, there we go. So we've got this kind of, this relaxed radius changes how close things can get to each other. Six feet in nanometers. What's 6 feet in nanometers? All right, cool. One thing that's pretty obvious is that they're all sort of in the same orientation. So what I want to do is actually sort of do a random rotation in the Y. So they all have to have the heads pointing up for now, and we're going to have random rotation. So let's see if we can make that happen. So we're going to do there's a what's it called? There's a circle distribution. I'm just gonna have to, oh, let's see what happens there. Up vector, normal. You know what? I'm just gonna make sure that this works. So we're gonna do the up vector is 1, and the normal vector is positive Z. There's various ways to do this to set the rotation. I could, yeah, why isn't that? So one way to do random rotation is just to set, what? I was pretty sure I had a random orientation. Well, so this is a quaternion. Oh, that's what it is. Attribute randomize. So we're not going to randomize the color. That would be, okay. So we've got random orientation, which kind of helps them look more random, but they're facing in all different directions. So that's not what I want to do. I want to do 3-dimensional. Did that work? Which way are they? I feel like this should be riveting, Googling. There's some commands that allow you to do sample. That's what it is. Sample circle uniform. I think that's what it is. Let me just check the returns a vector of length less than 1. No. Returns a unit vector. Well, where's the anybody watching is an expert in orientation? I was going to look this up before I started the stream, and then I ran out of time, and so obviously this is where I'm like getting... I mean, one way we could do it, I mean, there's various ways we could do it, but I really don't want to dig into quaternions right now, and I still think this is going to be relatively... a reasonable solution. Direction. Well, okay, let's try. I need... oh, that's tiny. Maybe 10. What? All right. Why can't I get closer? That's annoying. So what I want to do is I want to set man, that's so weird. Well, I think that's right, but I just want to double check here. So what I'm going to do is put down a seed. It looks like they're all right. They're all randomly oriented. But should. Did that change anything? I just wanted to normalize the normal. Okay. I think that works. So all I did was I sampled, instead of sampling a circle, I sampled a sphere, and then I flattened the sphere, which becomes a circle. I don't know if that's really, but I wasn't sure exactly what to do with the edge of the circle, because it only returns a vector 2, and I wasn't sure what specifically returns. Right. So I could take the x component and the z component. Oh well, I think that would give me the same thing anyways. All right. Cool. You know what? Let's unpack it. Yeah, so there we go. We've got our lipids hanging out on the membrane. And now we need to have the other leaflet. So we're going to take half of these, and we're going to put them down on the other leaflet. So split, you know what, we're going to do group. No, we're going to do a sort. And we're going to do random point order. So we've got a seed that controls the point order, so we can kind of mess with it and get something that we like. And then we're going to get a group, and we're going to copy that. Does that work? Bad parameter specified. Okay, we're going to do group expression. No, we're going to do a wrangle. I just like to keep changing my mind. Let's do it a little more explicitly. We are missing a semicolon. All right. So now we're going to transform the ones. Now we're going to split them, just so we can do something for the top and something for the bottom. So we're going to split the top, and we're going to merge. Basically, I'm just take half of the points and putting them down. How far down? Well, a lipid bilayer is a certain thickness usually, but we're not worried about how a lipid bilayer actually is. We're worried about social distancing. So we're going to push them apart a little bit further than is natural. All right. Now we need to flip them so that their heads are on the other side, because a lipid bilayer has two leaflets. The top one has the heads facing outward, and the bottom one has the heads facing outward as well. And the tails are kind of tucked up next to each other, like as though somebody was standing foot to foot. All right, So that's pretty easy. Theoretically, all we have to do is set the up vector to be down. So it worked. All right, but then that means we actually probably want to push them a little further apart. So in reality, the lipid membrane is probably about like that, maybe a little bit less even. That's kind of like what a more accurate lipid membrane would be. But again, social distancing. Get them apart from each other. Something like a so. All right, cool. What's next here? Let's set up our camera and see what kind of view we got. So what I wanted to do with this is, let's make a camera. I'm rendering this with Redshift, so I want to make sure I've got my Redshift camera parameters on there. I'm going to call this the shot cam. That's just what I like to call cameras. And what kind of field of view how do we actually want this to look? So we're going to just come back here and yeah, let's just, whoops, forgot to lock it to the camera. Lock the camera. Something like that. And what I want, so I'm looking down the middle. So right now we're looking at the edge. So actually what I want to do is put these ones up. And then we're just going to copy that and we're going to push this one down -1/2. No, not half. The full amount. The full amount. And that way we can spread them apart, push them together all in kind of one slider. So what I want to do is I want to have my camera like somewhere around there. Maybe we could push in a little bit. But what I want is for this to be kind of a wallpaper that can span a really ultra wide monitor. And so I was looking at ultra wide monitor resolutions. I know what my monitor resolution, so I've got one monitor, my main monitor, the one that I'm looking at now, is 1920 by 1200. That's 16 by 10. And then my secondary monitor, where I can see my stream health, which seems healthy, that's 1680 by 1050, which is also 16 by 10, but in a smaller resolution. And then I have a TV over there that I use for looking at like full-sized animation views and render, like checking render colors and stuff like that, is 1920 by 1080, which is 16 by 9. So I've got 3 different screens that none of them have the same resolution. 2 of them have the same aspect ratio, but I kind of want to have this lipid membranes like spanning all the way across them. And some people have ultra wide monitors. Some of those are 21 by 9, but I was looking into that. They're actually not 21 by 9. They're 21.5 by 9 usually, which is something like, was it 3,440 by 1440, something like that. I think that's a common one. But then you've got ultra wide screen 3.6, I think it's called, but they're not actually 3.6. They're 3.55 repeating. And those are 32 by 9, I think. And that's something like 5120 by 1440 if you've got 1440 this way. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go for the ultra wide screen. And if people want to download this and crop it or shrink it or, do whatever you want with it, that's totally fine. But yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. So what is that going to look like? So let's check the view. So if we do 5120 by 1440, yeah, right? Because it's like this is a panorama. So that's what I think I'm going to do. But I think I'm going to zoom out a bit so that there's actually a fair bit of space above and below, because I want this to be kind of not a sparse, but like a, I don't know what you'd call it, minimalistic in some ways, a little bit of a minimalistic look. So something like that. And then what kind of focal length do we want? Because we could do I think I want there to be kind of more separation between the foreground lipids and the background lipids, which would mean we should have a shorter focal length. So something like 35 and then push in, right? So there's more depth. I think depth is going to be something that I want to have in this. So something like that, where the background lipids are farther and the foreground lipids are closer. Let's make sure that the background ones are farther away than the foreground ones. That's important. All right, so if that's the case, so here's our camera. There's our frustum. So I just want to make sure that we've got enough sort of lipid in here. So let's actually, we can center that 400. That's kind of a nice even. So yeah, I kind of like that. I kind of like that. And that means if you had just a regular monitor, you could crop it in to something like that and it would still look pretty cool, I think. Well, let's see what the final thing looks like. Who knows? It might look terrible. All right, that's my rig. There's my membrane. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make sure that we have enough depth in the background. So what we're going to do is we're going to push this out way into the distance. Let's see how much our computer can handle. So I'm going to go a little bit further on that because, again, I want, this is going to be in the view, right? So even though it's going to be pretty far in the background. All right, I lost I don't want the background to look too sparse. And obviously, because we increase the size of the grid, the lipids are much farther apart. So we can increase the number that our scatter is using. But I kind of like that. Yeah. We went even we don't even need to do this up too much. Almost look like a cityscape, right? Are these far enough apart from each other? Yeah, let's relax this by 20. That actually doesn't. What does this look like? Whoops, not the relaxed iterations. I want the scale. Yeah, something like that. And then we could change the seed if we wanted to, which just randomizes further. So that's got enough in the foreground and lots in the background. I think I want a few more and I want them a little bit further apart. That's not what I meant to say. I want them I'm just looking at how close any of them are. I think that's a good density because you can see as it goes into the background, it's filling up. Let's go more. I want the background to be kind of full, but I also want to have some atmospheric perspective going into the background. All right, this is starting to look kind of cool, I think, anyway. Let's turn off the grid. Do we want them a little closer? How far do we want that? Yeah, it's starting to look like almost like a waveform or something like that. Yeah. Okay, so that's a good starting point. I think what I want to do next is also have some multiple different conformations. Because if, as you recall, these are all exactly the same conformation, and I want some of them to be kind of like, you know, doing various things. So I'm going to generate maybe 5 or 6 different ones, and then as they're randomized, and also randomize their rotation, you're not going to be able to say like, oh, this is exactly the same molecule as that one. It's just going to kind of, yeah, kind of do whatever. Did I get the frame? Yeah, the frame index is there. Okay, cool. So what's going on with this one? Frame index 115. I just want to make sure that I have that frame index because that's going to allow us to separate each one as we decide which one we're going to have happening. Sometimes I can't speak very well when my mind is otherwise occupied. Losing my train of thought. That's a lot. But if we pack them, it should like be pretty responsive. Although when it comes to render time, we might need to unpack. So we'll see how it goes in terms of like render speed. Because the idea is that I'm going to be doing the final render and comp on stream. So I'm going to be, hey, Derek. Glad to see you in the chat, at least virtually. Yeah, so I'm going to do the full 5,000 by 1440 render on stream. And if that takes half an hour, that's going to be pretty boring. So hopefully we can keep the render times pretty low. We'll see how it goes. If I have to render a lower resolution, and then maybe like if it comes to that, I can render a lower resolution. You can download it, and I'll update the link so that you can download a higher resolution when I get the final thing rendered out. But I'm quietly confident in getting a fast render out here. Okay, so what we wanted was getting some groovy dancing happening here. So yeah, let's see here. What I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm not capturing some states that are improbable. So I'm going to go I'm just thinking like how far do we want to go here? Okay, well, yeah, let's go crazy here. Let's do increase the main amplitude for the head as well. So we've got quite a bit of control over, let's see, let's reduce base motion. I don't know what's kind of like plausible in terms of these bond rotations. Question, the movement's data driven or just limited by bond angles possible? Neither. Well, so the only thing that I'm restricting right now is rotation around the bond. In order for it to be, so if it was data driven, that would mean that I would be importing data from like a molecular dynamics simulation offsite, and I'd love to get into that. I haven't really done much of that. don't think I've done really any of that. But I'm really interested in getting into like some actual like scientifically generated data. Right now, this is just rotating around the bonds. What I am hoping to do at some point is, to figure out how to limit the bond angles so that we don't have a situation like this where you've got these atoms colliding with other atoms. And I haven't really figured out a good way to do that, because to get that data feedback into the randomly generated sort of system is a little bit complicated. I'm not sure exactly what a good way to do that, but that's something that I'm going to be thinking about and hopefully improving on. So for the time being, just for this illustration, all I'm going to be doing is just looking for conformations that are not too crazy. What I did with the double bond, because the double bond should not rotate. So what I did in the rig was I just renamed it lock so that it doesn't actually have any influence from the random motion thing. Woo! Going crazy. I just want to get some like different looking stuff, right? Like that's a good pose. All right, so what we'll do is we'll just go in here and we're just gonna write out some poses. So I'm just saving the current frame. So I'm gonna save frame 96. That one's kind of like curled up on itself sort of thing. And as far as I can tell, there's no intersections here. So let's save that one. We could do something like that. And, you know, we could always go back and change the seed for the random. So as long as I'm not overwriting the same. Just change the seed on all of these. And then do something like that. Save, and see, like I'm not going to save that one because you can see that these things are overlapping. There's like creating all these wonky bonds. But that one's not bad. It's kind of like an interesting arrangement. Let's see, do we have anything messed up here? I think that's okay. And let's just do one or two more. It's kind of like a classic textbook pose. Limiting the bond angle would also be great for depicting unsaturated tails since cis trans. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Like this bond angle is already locked. Is that what you're talking about? And no matter how this bond and this bond rotate, it's not going to change that. But maybe I'm misinterpreting your comment. But yeah, with the rig, like I can change, because in order to sort of get around this problem of like having this stuff, having the tails kind of going into each other, what I'm doing is I'm having lower range of motion in the upper part of the tail and a broader range of motion in the bottom part of the tail. That's kind of like this tail fall off curve. So I can actually like tweak that quite a bit. I could have like no rotation around the middle section and then a lot of rotation at the beginning. And that kind of creates like, it's obviously a very strange fall off. But there's a lot of control in terms of like how much motion I want to give them. So I feel like for the time being, this is a nice rig to kind of work with. And I have the potential to, like, if I do have a problem, I can be like, yeah, let's just manually rotate this one away. Obviously going that far is kind of a problem there, but anyways. Yep. All right, let's get back to our membrane. So instead of just bringing in one, what I want to do is bring in, had caps lock on, bring in a bunch of these guys. So we're going to grab the same file, but we're going to go from 1 to 200, and we're going to merge on frame numbers. A double bond wouldn't rotate around the carbon-carbon axis. No, and these ones aren't. That's what I say. Like I specifically taking this bond and preventing it from rotating at all. All of the other ones are free to move within the range of the random settings, but the double bond is locked to not have any movement at all. So that's the only thing that's already sort of built in. To have sort of an awareness of, like, have this molecule, to have an awareness of this stuff, like, that gets pretty tricky. You basically have to have a dynamic simulation, which is what molecular dynamic simulations are all about. This isn't so much a simulation as procedural motion. But I hope to get there. All right, so let's grab... So missing files, we're just going to pull in no geo. So we've got 1011, 12. That's... Okay, so we're going to go for each point. Minecraft time. Minecraft is important. Thanks for joining. All right, so we're going to do, and what do we call this? Frame index. I did not call it frame index. I did call it frame index. All right, so we've got 8, it looks like, which is just fine. Now what? So we're going to take each of those and we're going to pack them. That's what we're going to do. We're going to pack them into its own primitive. And we're going to transfer frame index. Do we need anything else? I don't think so. We could also, yeah, let's give it the atoms. What? For each. Okay. Oh. I put the pack before the molecular generator. Cool. So what we could do is just unpack it after. And we're going to do how are we doing for time? So we're 1 hour in, and we're getting pretty close to all of the models, the molecule models that I want. But which one do we want? So what we're going to do is we're going to iterate over each point, and for each point we're going to grab the one it's just one random one. So we're going to do that. So this is just going to break for a little bit, and then we'll get it happening. So let's, do we want to do, we're going to choose which conformation we're going to want to put on for each one. So run over each primitive or point. It doesn't really matter. Well, just thinking how we want to select this. For now, we're just going to do this. I feel like there's a better way to do this, but I am not at my most clear. Right at this moment. All right. Cool. So you can see that as we're adjusting the slider, we're choosing which of the conformations that we're going to be putting on each of the points. Right? So that's cool. We've got a little selection from 0 to 7. And that'll work. And then we're just going to run over this one. So we've got, that still looks kind of the same, but as we choose which conformer we want, then we get a slightly different conformation. Now what we want is not, oh, interesting. Because some of the tails are kind of curled up in some of the instances, and sometimes they're extended in other instances, we're going to have variation in the distance between, like right now it's just kind of a straight line, but you can see that the width of that line changes as some of the lipids have longer tails. So that's going to be cool, that we're not just going to have a straight line across the middle. Let's see, but now we're not just going to have the same conformation on every point. We want a different one on every point. So we're going to create an iteration nude, and basically we're going to put that, whoops, put that into there. And we're going to say the conformer is not this slider. I'll keep that, but comment it out. We're going to use the detail attribute for input 1, which is this iteration. Let's call it iteration. No, that's not. That worked for the first 7 points because it's checking that one. So what we want is, you know what, let's break this apart a little bit. So this is the iteration number, or the point number of the thing, and then we're going to get a random, we're going to fit 01 from iteration. Just make sure that I've got the the value from 0 to 1. So the random number of the iteration, fit it from 0 to 8. And we're going to put this integer. I think that worked. I think that worked. So basically what that's doing is it's just putting a random number of a random confirmation number on each point. And let's make sure this is working. So so we can see on each of these how many of each conformer there are. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if we wanted to make more of them, then all we would have to do is just save out more of them and then just change the fit here. In fact, I kind of want to do that because I kind of want to have another one that's more extended. I want a little bit of a longer tail. So let's do something that's just kind of and we can see which frames we've already saved out. So we don't want to save over frame 22, for example, but we could save over frame 44. Kind of want to whoops. Don't want to have this, yeah. Kind of extend down a little bit. Don't want to go too far because then the hydrogens start bumping into each other. Cool. Something like so. And then let's save that out. And then reload this. Did that work? Yep, now we've got 9. And now we've got going from 0 to 8. And if we look here, maybe there's a little bit more of a closure there. And I think I do want to scooch these a little closer to each other. I want a little space, but kind of like that. All right. Time for a water break. Maybe you can hear the neighbors doing some kind of power tool. When I'm recording audio, that's really annoying, but with a live stream, I mean, there's only so much I can do. I can't go and, hey, turn that off. Ugh. All right. Now, is this going to destroy my computer if I unpack that? Nope. All right, so let's render something. All right, so we're gonna go to, let's make sure that we're instancing instance salt level pack primitives, because all the spheres are Do we want to smooth them at render time? Yes, we do. No, we don't. You can see in the viewport, it just like hit the limit of drawing polygons on there. So we're somewhere around over 20 million in the viewport, 20 million triangles. But at render time, that's not going to be a problem. He said confidently. All right, so let's get some lights and a material, and let's have fun with this. So, did I already have a generic? Oh, look at that. Yeah, that'll work. I'm going to call it lipid RS matte. And we're going to assign that material. We're going to create a light. So let's see here. Dome light. Now I might have to, let's just start rendering, see what happens. Famous last words. All right, can we dock this? Let's just try to put it in the viewport because I don't have a whole ton of screen real estate here. So we'll just scooch this over. And we're looking at ultra wide screen, so let's check the output. We're going to call this lipid. That's my project code. And when we're doing this, yeah, we'll just do fit window. And you may or may not hear engine noises as my graphics card starts getting a little bit heated as the fans spin up. Okay, well, I mean, it's rendering. That's cool. And the colors look right. I think I'm not going to go with just standard colors, although that is kind of cool. You know what? Let's just do. So one thing that I kind of want to do is have some sort of atmospheric volume. So pause that. Now, there's always the possibility that we're going to be crashing here because sometimes Redshift crashes. Okay. Very foggy. Okay, so we could just back the ground height, like the ground normal in like -Z, right? And just like -200. I mean 200. I mean 1. One of these combinations is going to get it. Basically, I want to have the lipids in the very foreground, not being fogged over at all. So let's do just make sure that scene view. Yeah, so the positive Z is towards us. Fog height. Oh, you know what? That's probably what it is. I didn't set a fog height. What? You know what? Let's let's make sure that we're doing this the right way. Yeah, okay. So you can see that okay, that didn't. So if we want to go it all the way up to 1, we want to have the ground point at, so we do want this to be at 1. And we want this to be at -100. Not quite sure. Why it's not blocking. You know what? Let's just do this again. It's possible that because we're looking down at So if we want I think I understand this, but for some reason it's not. Well, we shall attenuate it some other way. I mean, the other thing that we can do is we can add the fog in comp. And I might do that. But having a little bit in render can sometimes look better. I want to have stuff fading out to white in the distance. I mean, it's already pretty high key with the hydrogens. I think what I want to do... Okay, I mean, we don't have any lighting. Like, this is a complete white background. So let's work on that next. I think maybe I'll do the fog in comp, because I can do a depth pass and then get it fading out to the background. And I think I'll be able to get a little bit of finer control over it, so I don't have the foreground too occluded by it, which is part of the issue that I was trying to get around with that fog height thing. All right, so I think I'm gonna have to just flip the webcam view just briefly as I check for stuff, because I'm gonna have to dig through a bunch of different, not different folders, but folders in and around documents that may or may not be public. Okay, this should work. We'll see. Okay, so I've got a bunch of high dynamic range images. I don't want to look at the background. Oh. And it is a little tricky to see what what if we just do it like this? Disable that background. Whoops. This one is going to be... All right, so we've got the background, but it doesn't actually really contribute to the lighting. And that's just so I can get a sense of like what the lighting looks like with the background. So let's think here. Do we want something with kind of harsh shadows or kind of soft? I think I want something kind of soft, some nice lighting, but yeah, happy to hear your input too. So that's a very cool HDR. It also depends on the scale. So what we could do is, if we want to get a better sense of what is happening here, let's make this a polygon mesh. And then also give it a color. And give it the same material that the lipids do. Excuse me? Okay. All right, we got a giant sphere now that we can check out our lighting. Right, so we can do kind of have the sort of interactive lighting. I mean, that's not bad. We can always change the color saturation of the color tint if we wanted. So which one is that? That's Fish Hook Beach. Let's do, this one's kind of dramatic. Whew, that's hot. Like as in the lighting is, it's very hot. And I don't really, yeah. Let's see. We do something that's quite top lit. And then we've got some more contrast between the top and the bottom leaflet of the lipids. Something to be said for that. That one's pretty diffuse and kind of side lit. Again, that's pretty diffuse. So this is the process of look development. This is like kind of a slow iterative process as you kind of think about like, oh, what kind of look do I want? How do I want the light? And when you're dealing with stuff in a kind of in a molecular environment, it's hard to think about like what's actually motivating the lighting. And motivating, I mean like what's causing the lighting, because you don't really have light sources inside cells. Like that just doesn't really make sense. So you just kind of do something that's sort of artistically driven, and if you have a certain communication objective, like what do you want people to focus on, what do you want people to get from it, that kind of defines what kind of approach you get. It's very blue. I don't mind that. Let's see here. What do we have in terms of like rotation? We could probably do something with that. Let's see what it looks like on our membrane. On our membrane, okay. So we might, it's nice to have a little bit of color from it, but our background is quite, I'm not going to go perfectly white in the background, I think. I'm going to go, yeah. And maybe boost the exposure just a bit. We'd also change the gamma, which sort of adjust the contrast of the light. Yeah, let's see what we've done to our sphere here. So it's quite hot there, quite a bright, but don't mind it. Maybe I'm okay with that, especially as we go. Like we don't have it right now. It's like the far distance has the same value as the foreground, but I think once we knock that back with fog in the comp, I think that'll work. We get at least a little bit of contrast in the foreground. So what we could do is come on. Don't think the zoom shortcuts are working for some reason. Let's zoom in a bit. Let's do a fixed scaling at 40%. 70%. Yeah. And then we're just going to grab a region of this, so we don't have to render the whole thing every time. Because now what we're going to do is we're going to do some look dev on the lipids themselves. Because I'm thinking what am I thinking? I'm thinking that I don't want to use the original colors. I kind of want to do something a little bit more fun and like, I don't know. I don't know what. What if we do all of the non-hydrogen atoms kind of a color? And what if we do it like a gradient from left to right sort of thing? First off, I want to try, does this do, yeah, that still works. Okay, okay. Unable to finish the instance of point extraction. I have an idea. So what if we do something like, we'll give a value that's going to be a gradient from 0 to 1. That's going to be the x coordinate from well, how big is our grid? Oops. It was like 1200, wasn't it? 1800. Close enough. We're going to go from negative 900 to 900, map to 0 to 1. Right? So our gradient here is going to have a value there. And that's going to determine the color. Is there any merit in reducing the size of the hydrogen atoms so the carbons pop? There could be. Right now the atoms are, in terms of their radius is based on the van der Waals radius of the atom. So proportionally the atom sizes should be the same. Because we're doing Whimsical Wallpaper Wednesday, I don't think there's any harm in changing the size of the hydrogens. But I think I will wait and see what the color, like the palette looks like sort of in the final colors. And then maybe it'll, yeah, maybe that's not a bad idea. To kind of let more of that color through. But let's see what it looks like with the sort of the final color scheme. Yeah, okay, so we've got a gradient there. And we're also going to do, we're going to set a switch for the hydrogens versus the other things. So if the element equals H, hydrogen, then LM type equals 0. Let's say 1 if we wanted to give it the actual element number. or, because then we'll just color everything else 2. So that means that hydrogens are going to be 1. Everything else is going to be 2. If we want to add in more colors, we could with more options. Like we'd have the nitrogen. Or is there nitrogen? There should be nitrogen. It's just hidden in the methyl groups. So, and the phosphate. Maybe we color the phosphate something different, but I'm going to try and see how this gradient goes. What if we did like a multicolored? Okay. So we've set that up. Wait, let's make sure that we got. Okay. So instead of the color being the color, let's use a scalar to drive a ramp. And this scalar was called gradient, was it not? So that's the attribute. And then we're going to get a ramp. And that's going to be the input. And that's going to be the color. And I thought I had a preset for some colors, but no matter. Let's just make sure this is working like we were hoping it would. Just kind of set up a little bit of rainbow. I don't think I'll do like a rainbow color ultimately, but it's a good way to see what's happening. Go back to red at the end. And we want a shader switch so that we can have the element type drive the thing. So we've got, that's the selector, and we've got the ramp being shader 2, and shader 1. Let's just give, let's not make the hydrogen pure white. Let's give it maybe like 0.85 value or something like that. So it's not like 100% white. And then let's do that to be the color. All right, let's just go back to fit window. Turn off that. Fingers crossed. Did I screw anything up? Okay. So I think it's too wide. You can just see at the very back, you've got some red and some red, but in the foreground, it's not. So we can always just like, all we're capturing is like this, right? So still looks kind of cool, if I do say so myself. I mean, what we could do is we could do black. Yeah, and then just kind of like constant. Then we can kind of get a feeling for the edges. Now, if we're expecting that people are going to be cropping this in, then the gradient kind of span doesn't make as much sense. But that's okay. People could crop it out different ways. You could have like this for Monday and this for Tuesday, and then you could see how far through the week you are just by how your wallpaper is cropped. Okay, so it looks like we're getting something there. So maybe 0.7 would be the edge of where we want the range to be. And on this side, I mean, presumably it's going to be about the same. Whoop. That was... We subsumed another ramp knot, I think. Oh, yeah, there it is. This is kind of slow when everything's rendering. Just get rid of that. Anybody have suggestions for colors? I was kind of thinking like an orange to a peach, or like a sort of like a sunset color. Maybe kind of like a purplish, orangish peach gradient. Yeah, so we're getting black there. So, okay. So let's start simple. Let's do something. We're not going to do black as the side ones. I just want to see where stuff is getting cropped in, where the edges of the image are, basically. So let's do let's just do 3 colors for now. So I kind of think like a rosy orange, and then like start with that kind of, and then like into a sort of a purplish. Something like that. Let's see. Let's do the fixed scaling. Come in and see how the colors are working. And let's just grab a bit at a time. I also think maybe we want to do a little bit shinier. I mean, we could always change the index of refraction to kind of make things, no. I did that on a recent image, made things kind of look pearlescent, but kind of thinking a little bit more of a matte finish might be cool. And I kind of think, I mean, please let me know what you guys think in the chat, but in terms of the color, like the weight of the color, I think that the hydrogen balance is okay as it is. It's not too bad. There's definitely enough, or there's definitely some color coming through. I think I can punch it up more. But yeah. Now the thing that I'm thinking right now is the borders between the lipids are like almost impossible to tell, so that kind of defeats the purpose of the concept being like the lipids are farther apart. So if you know what you're looking at, then it kind of makes sense. But if you don't, this all just looks like a continuous sea of atoms. So 2 things that will help with that. One is depth of field. I'm going to have a relatively shallow depth of field, or moderate depth of field, and I'll add that in comp. And the other thing is adding that fog, which will create some separation between foreground and background. I could do something like I could do a shader based thing where the distance from the foreground determines how dark something is, but again, that's just going to be a gradient. That's not going to separate one lipid from its neighbor. I kind of like those colors. let me see if I can make them, boost them just a little bit. Whoa. Maybe I don't want to have a value greater than 1. I can bump that up a bit. And yeah, again, that's interesting that the, I mean, so what if the value does go higher? Am I making new colors never before seen by human eyes? Let's bring it back a little bit. How cool do we want it to get? Cool in terms of like color temperature, like a blue. I mean, there's something to be said for that. Kind of like how the background sort of gets brought in the background. In fact, I might do something like, where do we go from that? This just kind of gets muddy. I can bring it back to red. Do kind of like that sort of peach. And then here, so it's not going to be visible in the foreground of the image, but just in the background. This is kind of a sort of a deep. And then this one. Maybe we don't want to go quite so red. We're going to be crossing. All right, well, let's zoom out. It's not the way I wanted to zoom out. Fit window. All right. See what kind of colors we got. Do I want the background to, I don't want the background to get darker. I want the foreground to be darker. I was thinking of other ways to yeah, and then that one, let's bring it up because that one's going to be going back into the fog. That means maybe this one I want something a little deeper. Maybe, not sure about the purple. What if we bring it? I don't really want hot pink either. I don't know if this kind of, sort of taking a step back, this sort of live stream. So that in previous live streams, I haven't really done much of the rendering, the look development sort of thing. And this is obviously more focused on that because it's like making the full illustration, the full rendered and everything like that. So I don't know if this is of interest, then let me know if this sort of thing people like watching, even if you have it in the background or whatever, people like watching rendering and stuff like that, or if people like the more technical sort of rigging and effects sort of stuff with that sort of thing. yeah, so it's again a bit of an experiment to see how this kind of stream goes. And yeah, a fun lipid party. Yeah, I'm hoping it like I'm trying to give it a kind of a buoyant sort of lighter feeling to it. Okay, well, that's not too bad, I think. Let's see if we can always tweak some stuff in comp. So what I want to do for that is to set up a specific kind of shader. So typically when rendering, you want to have the ability to have masks for different things in comp. You can do a puzzle mat, but I can't do a puzzle mat as is because I want to be able to separate the hydrogens from the other element types, like the colored ones. And right now they're all kind of lumped together and they're in one object. So what I'm going to do, set up a depth pass. So that's going to be for our this is going to be our puz mat. So the depth, the Z is for a depth of field and adding that depth fog. And this one is going to be a specific shader. So what we're going to do is we're going to just copy that. And we're going to call this mat. Hello, mat. And we're going to test it out by doing this. And instead of our funky gradient, we're going to do red and green. Should be 1. 1 and 1. Sweet. Okay, so now we've got hydrogens and other molecules. And so in theory, we can secondary ray visibility. Okay. So now what we can do is we can make sure that those things are working by going back to our original lipid mat, fit window, and now we'll go do final render quality. I wonder if, okay, well, let's do a bit of this for, make sure this is working. So the beauty should be our fancy colors, like a so. Our puzzle mat should be like a so. And our Z depth should have data in it. Let's make sure that we got some data in here. Yep, we got a scalar value. That's the distance from the camera to the object. Cool. And let's do fixed scaling. Okay, this is full res. Let's make sure that this is go away. Oh, come on. Now, there's quite a bit of noise here, so that's what we got to deal with. Let's get rid of that. What? Click the wrong button. You know what? Stop. Let's do reflections. Now all of this stuff is going to determine how long this takes to render. I could do automatic. Redshift now has a new automatic rendering, automatic sampling mode, where you just say how much noise you want. Like you can see there's quite a bit of noise in here. And I wonder if that's because of that secondary dome. I should turn that off, actually. The back plate. Because I don't actually want that in the final image. I'm just using it to gauge the colors and stuff. Is the render too small? This might take a few minutes to render. But I think the let's go for it. So we're going to give it some global illumination, which is going to have some bounces of light between the different lipids, which is going to have some of that color bleed from these nice saturated colors. And already, I don't know if you can see, but I can see that it's got a more mellow candy color, like sort of feeling to it. So once it's done here, so that's before and that's after. So it's just kind of got a luminous quality. So it's going to take longer to render, but I think it's going to look better. All right, so we're 2 hours in. So at this point, the YouTube engine is like, your stream is too long, and it's going to automatically crop after 2 hours. But once the rest of it is finished processing, it'll come back. It's not going to be permanently gone. All right, so I'm just gonna hit render. We got our puzzle mat still working. We got our Z depth still working. So where's this rendering to? Just make sure that not a multi-layered beauty. Hip file, no job, render, hip name. If you'll excuse me, I'm just gonna double check. Hang on a sec. So make sure that I've got my file naming properly, so it doesn't so it actually writes out the files. Because if I rendered the whole thing, it didn't write anything. That would be embarrassing and bad. Yeah, that's not right. The syntax for this kind of like dot. Don't think that's necessary, but all right. Let's render it. This colossal wallpaper. How's everybody doing? I was gonna tell some anecdotes, but then I just get sucked into the making process and I forget to talk about stuff that's not related to what I'm doing, which is probably just as well, because when I try to talk about stuff that's not what I'm doing, I either can't figure out what I'm doing on screen and just like make a bunch of mistakes, or I lose my train of thought and can't remember the sentence that I was saying. But in any case, so one thing that I did, I was going to mention this back from the first production stream, because I was trying to figure out how to get a green screen hung up behind me. You can't see it because it's invisible, because it's a green screen. But yeah, so I had a big green screen, and I had some tripod stands, like or like light stands that extend and have a little 1/4 inch screw or whatever, like your standard sort of tripod head at the top. And I managed to get a curtain rod from one of the spare rooms, or one of the rooms in this house that didn't mind having no curtains for a bit. And I was trying to figure out how to get that curtain rod to stick to the tripod or the light stands. I could have taped them, but that seemed like a horrible process. What I ended up doing was we had our old Christmas tree hanging out in the yard, and so I cut off some ends of it, some little sections of it, drilled a hole in the bottom to stick on the tripod head, and then I drilled a hole in the side. You can see that I've got that nice little that fit for the curtain rod, so the thread goes through and then it gets stuck in there, and then that's what's holding up the green screen right now. It's a great solution. It's a little bit sappy, in the sense that there's sap on it and sticky. And so there's my handyman story. Question: what's the pros cons of Houdini versus Maya Cinema 4D? That's a very good question. That's something, and it's there's different answers depending on what kind of work you're trying to do. So most commonly, Houdini, I'd say, is used for visual effects, like fire in the industries, like fire and smoke simulations, liquid sims, cloth sims, yeah, that kind of stuff. The reason, like at the core of it, is a procedural workflow. So as you can kind of see in the work that I was doing, like you can change the inputs, and then basically you're just setting up bunches of rules so that the output has it's not necessarily what you expect. Like there's a lot of randomness. You could see that we're doing lots of random generation, and that's the kind of thing that you want in sort of like a smoke simulation or something like that. You just have all these input parameters, and you can change how it's being driven, and then you have a result that can be art directed. You can adjust things in various ways, but it's a way of doing that more quickly and more effectively and efficiently. When it comes to molecular visualization, because it's got that procedural workflow and it's very data driven, you can get a really low level control of the stuff that you want to control. So for example, we can set up a lipid membrane like this, and you could set up something like this in Maya and Cinema 4D. Definitely, this isn't outside of their realm of capabilities, but it's kind of the workflow. The approach is more conducive to working with data, like low level data. Like I can grab easily all of the carbon atoms in my scene. I can grab all of the hydrogen atoms. I could grab all of the, phosphates that are above a certain height and do something with those, or there's lots of sort of low level processes for like checking like distances between things. So if I wanted to get into that, like, like the steric occlusion, like the bond rotations and not having the collisions, you can do all of that sort of stuff where you have checking point neighbors and distances and like lots of like low level stuff. And the programming aspect is really built in. Like you could see all those, they're called wrangles, but basically are little code snippets that work with the data, work with the work with it. And you can do that stuff, but it's a lot harder to get into in Maya and Cinema 4D, and there's more the integration between that kind of procedural scripting workflow is much more native to Houdini. So I'd say, well, one thing that I kind of, I don't know if this is strictly true, but this is kind of the feeling that I get. The pros and the cons of Houdini are, if you have a task that you want to do in Houdini, it might take 10 or 15 minutes, whereas in Maya or Cinema 4D, it would only take a couple of clicks. Like, this is a con for Houdini. It doesn't give you everything, like all of the tools that you're like, whoa, why can't I just, like that rotation stuff, like where I was trying to get the rotation, like that stuff would be sort of easier to do in MASH in Maya or with the motion graphics operators in Cinema 4D. Like that stuff is more natively built in. But the point is, if in Houdini, well, on the flip side, stuff that might take you hours in Maya and Cinema 4D sometimes can just take you 10 or 15 minutes in Houdini. Like, it's like really difficult stuff in Houdini is not that hard, but really easy stuff in other software is still a little bit hard in Houdini. So it kind of like flattens this sort of difficulty and process into stuff. Like, it takes some time, but it only takes some time. I don't know if that makes any sense. Yeah, that's the sort of feeling I have. I feel like there's more power once you get in under the hood, right? Like, you can, in Maya and Cinema 4D, it's like, oh, I want to do this. And it's like, well, you can't really do that unless you do some scripting or like get sort of under the hood. Whereas in Houdini, like, there is no hood. It's like you have access to that low level stuff right out of the gate, and that can be overwhelming and a really steep learning curve. But once you start to get a handle on the little bits and pieces, the nuts and bolts, it is very much like making, whatever you want at the nuts and bolts level. Maybe that's a better analogy. It's like, yeah, it's much more nuts and bolts. But once you start putting together those nuts and bolts in certain ways, you can use those modules in however many times you want. Like that random motion thing, that like the random motion rig, it takes a while to set up one time, but if I had a different molecule, it wouldn't be that hard to like apply the same rig to that other molecule and have all of the same controls that I want to. Do people combine Houdini with Maya Cinema 4D? Yeah, they do. So Houdini has, there's different ways you could do it. One is just like you do your modeling in Maya or Cinema 4D, and then you bring that over to Houdini to do the effects or the simulations that you want to do. That's one example. You can send stuff the other way. So you like have all of the effects, bake it to Alembic or FBX or various formats, and send that to Maya and Cinema 4D for like some rendering or whatever else you want to do. Houdini also has a Houdini engine, so that means that you can have, let's say, a rig or an effect and bring it into Maya. I don't think they have Houdini engine for Cinema 4D, but it's like Houdini is running inside of Maya. So you have all of the controls that you want. It's like this asset, that's this package that came from Houdini, but it's also like still wired into Houdini. So you get all of that flow. So if you wanted to make a lipid rig, for example, that has like creates a lipid membrane, and the membrane is defined by whatever geometry, you could have that in Maya, and you could have that shape being controllable inside of Maya, but it's the Houdini engine under the hood that's driving like the lipid density and interactions and stuff like that. So that's another example of using Houdini engine. And there's also like Houdini engine for Unity and Unreal. So you could set up like a road building system in Houdini, and then have that inside of Unity, and you could have your curves being drawn by your level designer in Unity, and that procedural asset generation is happening through that Houdini engine. Sorry. So yeah, it's definitely it's a team player. It's a combo thing. Well, our render's done. That only took 5 minutes. Not too bad for a 5,000 by 1,400 pixel thing. So I'm going to switch gears, and I'm gonna have to hide the screen here as I find the find my files. Let's make sure it actually rendered out. Looks like it did. So I'm just gonna bring in the files, and then I'll turn the screen back on for a little bit of comp work. Save my file somewhere. All right. So here we are in Fusion. This is where we're going to do the comp. So this is where we're going to create a background, add our fog, add our depth of field, and maybe tweak some colors and stuff like that a little bit. All right, so there's our beauty pass, and the checkered stuff just means the background is transparent. There's our puzzle mat. There's our Z depth. So what do we want to do? So let's do the fog first. No, let's do the background first. So I want the background. Maybe I don't want it completely white. Just like, yeah. There we go. Except the background needs to have that same dimension. So was it 120 by 1440? Nice widescreen. And some nice looking lipids. Candyland sort of thing going on. All right, so now what we want to do is take the depth, and we're going to remap the depth. So I did this with a custom tool, but let's even remember how to do this. I do have another file where I use this as an example. So yeah, that's not what I want to do. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to grab so that this doesn't take too long, because I could figure this out, but it's going to be a little bit annoying to and I can't show the Can't show my other file, sorry. All right, so this is what I wanted to do, was create a custom tool that's yeah, basically remaps the background into a certain range. So what range do we want? So I think the background was like, let's say 2000. That's not 2000. And the foreground is something like 500. So we could clip, I want to clip the background. Yeah. So then, let's just clip the foreground and the background. So that's 0, 0. I might want to go a little bit further. Can you do this faster? Zoom, zoom, no. So I don't want the foreground lipids to be too, but I want a little bit of separation. Okay, and then as we go into the background, so the background might be like, what if we did like 1800? Just want to clip the background. And then basically I want to layer the background over the foreground, but only in certain areas. So I want to do put the red in the alpha, and then merge this again, but over the foreground there, but only in the background. It's a little icky. You can see that like around there, that's kind of like, what if we did it like that? Just want to see if this gives us anything better. It's kind of the same, isn't it? Yeah, come on. I could do where's the well, I might, let's see. Not totally happy with that, but I think I'm gonna move on from that for a minute. I'll see how the depth of field. goes. All right, so let's see here. We're gonna just take that off for now. Let's see the depth. I'm gonna do just think. Wait, what was the auto range? 385. Okay, so we'll do 400, and we'll do something like that. And then, yeah, something like that. And then let's do some extreme depth of field. That is far too extreme, but it does really separate out the foreground from the background. We could do something like that. Let's bring this back. See how that's, yeah, that's nicer. We could kind of skew the curve a little bit. We can always, yeah, I don't, let's bring this down just a little bit. Now, we're gonna output this in, oh, you know what we want to do? Color space do we want to do? I don't think it I think it's fine. We're going to output this in sRGB to really limit our colors, although it probably won't be too bad. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do well, actually, yeah, we'll just do all right. So this is going to be our, whoops, our mask for our atoms. I'm going to do a little color corrector here. This will be the effect mask for this. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to boost the saturation a little bit. If you can hear screaming, that may or may not be one of my children. I suspect it's not a life-threatening situation. All right, so we're just boosting the contrast a little bit. We could really deepen the colors, but just give it a little bit of saturation boost, and I don't want to actually go too far because then it starts to get like some sort of ugly shadows. Just give it a little bit of contrast, but not like crazy, because that stuff starts to get a little ugly, in my personal opinion. But Okay, well, I think gotta put my logo on it. Where are we gonna put the logo on it? What if people crop the logo out? You want to go full logo? Back it off. Yeah, let's make it a little bit more image appropriate. All right, I'm gonna quickly save this out, and then you can download it. And I'll tell you what, after the stream, I'm gonna play with it a little bit, see if I can fix some of these crunchy edges. That's a technical term, crunchy edges. If I can't do too much about it, like I think at 100% it's not very noticeable, but it kind of bothers me. It's like, it's not totally perfect. I think I don't want quite so much background blur. I think there's decent separation and the fog helps. I don't think I need it to be like get super out of focus super quick. Yeah. All right. Goodness, I've been recording for a long time. So I'm just gonna hide my screen just briefly while I save this out to Dropbox. If anybody final questions, for anybody that stuck around this long, and like you can feel free to share this link with friends and family if and colleagues, as long as you tell them who made it and to come for the next come hang out for the next live stream. Maybe I'll do another wallpaper. Maybe I'll do a shot from an animation. Maybe I'll just play some video games and just become a game streamer instead of a biomedical animator. Who knows? That would be a little bit disingenuous. All right. Let's do... Oh, did I bring this? Yeah, this came in as actually, you know what? I just want to check the bit depth of the how did you do the depth? That doesn't change anything, does it? Yeah, I had an issue recently that had to do with like the bit depth of backgrounds and stuff like that, and it was quite enlightening. I actually learned a lot in that frustrating little moment. But yeah. All right, render. Yeah, feel free to drop questions about life, the universe, and everything if you have any questions. I'm just gonna, I rendered out a TIFF. I'm gonna save a JPEG. We gotta find out where comp frames. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I was looking at a safer web preview and I was like, why can't I see my image? And I realized that I'm looking at a tiny little part of the corner, which is just white. All right. One minute away from the link dropping. Make sure I don't have any spelling mistakes. Copy Dropbox link. There you go. Somebody download it and tell me if it works and if you like it. Yeah, so that's gonna do it for the Whimsical Wednesday Whimsical what did I call it? Whimsical Wallpaper Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciated your comments and questions, and I hope that the wallpaper, even if you don't use it as a wallpaper, I hope you enjoyed the stream. And yeah, look forward to next time. And who knows what that'll be, if it'll be a wallpaper production stream or something. But follow me on Twitter at Biocinematics. Trying to think of final remarks. Yes. If you want to see Biocinematics continue, feel free to check out my Patreon if that's something that you can is within your affordability and your interest. Patreon.com/Biocinematics. If you are not subscribed to Making Biocinematics, subscribe, ding the bell. That really helps me, and you get notified of these live streams and stuff like that. And yeah, also my main channel, which will hopefully have a new video in the coming weeks, if all goes well. Thank you, Derek, for the kind words and for checking the download link, and all of your questions and comments. It's great to have you part of the stream. And that's it for me. Thanks again for joining me. I'll talk to you next time.